Where were we before the phone rang? Oh yes, I'm talking about installation of RAM. Um, when we were talking about motherboards, when I was talking about those RAM slots, on some of those motherboards, they actually have little clip holders for the RAM on one side or both sides. The older ones have both sides. The newer ones just have one side to where you slide the stick in, you pop it into place. It is keyed. I didn't tell you about the keying of this motherboard, of the RAM. You see there's a little notch here. One thing about the RAM is you can't put it in backwards, because some people will try and they'll try and force it, and that's not a good idea. I've seen it happen. I've seen computer come into the store that were beeping, going beep, 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 beep. And of course that means that the RAM is either missing or not installed properly. There are beep codes and counts, but for the most part, when you hear that sound, you go, RAM. So there's DDR, old school, SD-RAM before that, DDR2, DDR3, and DDR4. Pricing is very vital. Tiger Direct, Newegg, Crucial, what have you, and ASI if you're a wholesaler, or Mall Labs is good sources, but you might have to qualify as a reseller. But for retail, you can go to Fry's Electronics down here, just down the street in Roseville, or the best one that I like is the one in Northgate, which is North Sacramento. Both Fry's Electronics stores have a good supply of RAM. When it comes to Windows computers and Mac computers, the RAM is basically the same now, even though, like in this case, this RAM here says Patriot, it says Mac series. Technically the RAM is the same. They don't want to tell you that. It's like the word medical. You just put the word medical on something that's 4 times the cost of something you get over in the normal world. So, what else about RAM? Price. Price per gig. Same with disk drives. Price per gig is everything. So for 8 gig of RAM or 4 gig of RAM, you're looking between, I'm just going to say $50 and $100. I always do price ranges because there could be a sale on, or there could be a surplus or something like that. So when it comes down to RAM, you look at our invoices, you look at our quotes. 16 gig of RAM is going to cost you $200. I'm just going to ballpark that, just $200. Plus or minus 25. DDR3, DDR4. DDR4 is less than DDR3 right now. When will DDR5 come out? It's probably already out inside some manufacturing companies. What else? When you look at your motherboard, there is a max RAM specification. And there are types of RAM that don't work with certain motherboards. An Intel board, an AMD board, DDR3, DDR4, doesn't matter. You read the manual or you read the online specification from the manufacturer's website. That's important. We've had many people come in that they try to do it yourself, which is great. I love people trying it on their own, but they can't figure it out. So they bring it into our store. We look at the situation, we look at the board, we look at the RAM, we look at the processor, and for some reason they can't get it to post. So what we do is we say, so what's missing in this equation? So either we'll strip it down and just verify the processor to the board compatibility, and then we'll check the RAM. We'll plug in our own RAM, just 1 stick of RAM. If we can get it to post, power on self-test, we're golden. The rest comes up. Now we've seen people try to overclock their motherboards before they come to us, and in doing so, we go back down to stock configuration in the BIOS. BIOS stands for Basic Input Output for the motherboard. So I can't think of anything else when it comes to RAM. Does it go bad? Yes. Can you drop it and it goes bad? Yes. When people touch the gold parts of the stick, this part here is the gold. Be really careful. As far as heat sinks and clearance, this stick of RAM here has this big heat dissipation component on top of it. That causes clearance problems when it comes down to installing it, and you have a heat sink on your processor that comes up to it. You can get close, just don't make it to where it's pushing the RAM out of the slot. Can't think of anything else right now, so don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. And if you are a RAM manufacturer or OEM and you want to sponsor us, you can. So I'm going to make sure that we get started here, and we've got 8 or 9 videos. I could go into post and clean them up. Got to put all the disclaimers, put all the links, but right now I'm going to try and do 2 to 3 videos a day. Even if we go back over things, we'll always be filling in the gaps. Things might change a little bit, but one customer out of 1,000 continually asks me, how do you keep up? Well, it really hasn't changed. Computers haven't changed that much. It's just ones and zeros, and then it comes down to price. It really comes down to price. I mean, as far as RAM goes, every time somebody asks me about a computer, I say 3 components. There's 3 components you look at for pricing. 1, the processor. It's got to be a quad core or higher these days. i5, A8, A10. The amount of RAM, 4 gig of RAM or higher minimum. And if it is 4 and there's room to go to 8 cheaply, let's do it. And then the hard drive. The hard drive has to be 500 gig or higher. Serial ATA3, SSD, or M2. And the SSD M2, that can be a little smaller right now for this day and age. 250 gig SSD, 250 gig M2 NVMe connector. Those are really fast. But as far as the price point, both in a computer as well as a laptop, those are the 3 components I look for. I look for the CPU, the amount of RAM, and the hard drive type and size. And the RAM has got to be, if it's a laptop, it's going to be DDR4. If it's DDR3, that's fine. It's mainstream now, and it's on the back side. If it's DDR4, it's mainstream. Maximum RAM on a laptop right now is 16 gig, and that's for power. You will see on the higher end laptops, they'll try and push 32, but I don't see that many. But of course, I'm not mainstream gamer. I'm just mainstream business, mainstream, computing. That's about it. So I'll stop there, and we'll catch back up on the next subject, okay? Stay tuned. More to come.